Hey y'all, welcome to my iPad buying guide. So this week I've been sort of struggling to figure out if I want an iPad and if so, which one to go for. I've probably seen every major iPad video on YouTube from every creator, big and small, especially on the iPad mini. And I think the first place to start off is why an iPad? Like, why would you want to get one if you got a phone or a big phone or and a computer? Why would you want a tablet? Or who would want a tablet even better? So to start off the sort of the list is look, number one, it's great for people who aren't tech literate. For example, like your grandparents or your kids. Like they want access to the internet, but they don't know how to get around it. They don't want to go through turning on the computer and sitting there waiting for it to load because we know how our parents' computers are like stupidly slow. Um, because like I don't know, they install all sorts of weird apps and games. Like one of the most frustrating ones I always get is what software can I install on my computer to make it faster? Like, no, it doesn't work in that way. You wouldn't add another resource to speed something up, but that's a separate complaint. Anyway, so the other thing is it's excellent for students as a note-taking device. I am very big on being paper free, especially if you know the notes you make can go straight to the cloud. I don't think I've actually had a notebook for maybe 15 odd years. Um, and especially with something like the Apple Pencil as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. It does become very easy to take notes, especially if you're a handwriter. I'm not a handwriter, I like to type, but if you are a handwriter, then it is a must-have accessory. Um, the next thing is if your work or your lifestyle revolves around creating content on your phone, a tablet might be better, but simply because whatever you're looking at, you can multitask more. Whatever you're looking at on your phone is just bigger on a tablet, and that's just better for your eyesight and better for your productivity. I don't think iPhones allow split screen multitasking, but the iPads do. So that is another positive. The other one is creativity in drawing. So, for example, Procreate or Photoshop, it is quite interesting to use it on an iPad. Even photo and video editing, Lightroom on iPad is somewhat becoming my favorite way to draw and create because like it's just on there. You're interacting with the actual screen, and things like a Wacom, they do cost quite a lot of money on the higher end. So it's interesting to see that the iPads somewhat compete, especially the pro level iPads, somewhat compete with the low latency, high refresh rate, and the the color accuracy of the display. Next is a lot less technical, I guess. It's reading books on your iPad. You see, comic reading as well. I know there's Kindles out there which are great for reading a ton of books, but you don't get some of the features like you do on the iPad. And also, like, it just does more. You can do so much more with an iPad compared to a Kindle, so there is that as a factor. And the next one is video calls. So, since maybe 2020, video calling has shot right up in everyone's life. Now, the iPad, I think all of the iPads now have this feature called Center Stage, which is where the iPad will follow you. The camera will follow you around as you walk. It's some kind of like voodoo magic software, but it's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. I would think an iPad would be great for video calls, especially if you've got an elderly relative somewhere and you want to talk to them frequently. FaceTime is quite useful for that because, like most things Apple, they just work. And finally, one of the main reasons to get an iPad would be for mobile gaming. I think it's one of the best ways to play a game. Now, as a side point, on one of my Android devices, I've installed like a PlayStation 1 emulator and I've been playing, PlayStation 1 games on it. And it's way more enjoyable now than it's ever been, wiring up a PlayStation to your TV and sitting there and playing games. Like, no, like it's so much easier, so much more fun. Just it's like a giant PSP, to be honest. But yeah, mobile gaming, and to be honest, Android gaming sucks. Other than the retro consoles and video game preservation XYZ, um, the iPad games and the way the games are optimized is so much better. And to experience that for going from like a 5, 6 inch phone to at least 8 inch tablet with the iPad Mini, it's so much more feature rich and immersive. So I think what we'll do is we'll dive in and have a look at the iPad models. So let's zoom in a little bit more. Okay, cool. So firstly, we have the iPad regular, the plain Jane basic budget iPad. Now this is what, about 320 odd pounds. And yeah, okay, like I'm not gonna go too much into spec. I think that would somewhat um, take away from this video because it doesn't matter which iPad you buy, they're all gonna work great. Like as long as you buy a brand new iPad that's a current generation one, it'll run for at least 6 to 7 years. At year number 5, 6, and 7, it might not run fast, but it will run and it'll be more than capable of doing whatever you need. So the basic iPad, and it's got the old retro design, but again, it's thin, it's light, and you can get a keyboard case and the Apple Pencil, the first generation one, which plugs into the Lightning port. Um, that's the one it works with. This. It's not the one that attaches magnetically. So for £320, you pretty much get everything that the top pro level iPad does. It just doesn't do it as fast as powerful. So, like it says, it's got an A13 Bionic chip. That just means it's fast. Like, okay, and yeah, all the games will play. It'll last. All these iPads are quoted to last about 10 hours, and that should be fine. Um, I don't recommend you take pictures with an iPad, but if you wanted to, you could. Um, and yeah, it just works. And it's one of those things, right? For um, let's say 300 odd pounds, you get pretty much 80, 90% of what the top level iPad does for a fraction of the price. So this is it's an entry level iPad for a reason, but it's like the ninth generation one. All the kinks, all the issues, they've refined out of the iPad. Like if you got an iPad 1, 2, I know the iPad 3 was very popular. If you got one of those, this is like way better. It's like stepping into the future, but not the future. Because if you wanted to step into the future, then I would say we'd go to the next one, which would be the iPad Mini. Now, this is probably my favorite iPad, um, simply because it's small. The 8 inch size is perfect because it's big enough to put in your pocket. So it's small enough to put in your pocket, but the screen is big enough to use comfortably. And the only thing this iPad is lacking, in my opinion, is the M1 chip. It still uses the A14 or A15 processor, but just look at that. Let me scroll a little bit down. Just look at that. It's just multitasking, and it's literally like having two phones side by side, similar to the Microsoft Surface Duo. And this also works with the Apple Pencil too, which charges magnetically charges to the side, and it does everything. And look at that, he's playing some games on there as well, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it comes in colors and stuff. That's the thing with the original iPad. It only comes in like gray or like darker gray. So this one at least has some options. And yeah, the display's good. The display on all the iPads is pretty good, to be honest. Um, and it's got Touch ID too. I think the basic one has that as well. And yeah, like you're gonna get everything that the basic iPad has, but in a smaller size. Realistically, when this was released, it was a small version of the iPad Air, and yeah, like it's cool. It's good. This is probably like the go-to one I would buy for myself. Um, but let's see what else we got here. We should also spend a minute talking about the other iPad. This iPad is a brand new iPad Air. So this is has been recently updated and it's sort of turned things upside down, especially for me because I was in the market for an iPad and I was like, yeah, I'll just get the mini because like it'll work. But now they've added the M1 chip to the iPad Air and I'm like, oh shoot, that M1 chip is quite good. And I'll come back to this. I'll circle back around to this towards the end, hopefully. But this M1 chip that they put in is powerful. It's powerful enough to make the iPad last at least 10 years if Apple wanted to. It's not in their business to make devices last that long. Like 3 to 5 years is when they want you to sort of nudge you to change. 5 to 7 years, they're telling you you have to stop using this. Go and change your iPad. With the M1 chip, I'm somewhat skeptical that will it really be future proofing the device versus getting like an A15 Bionic, or even if you had like a generation for the previous generation iPad Air, which had like I think A14 in there. Like, will it make it that much better? But we'll find out. Time will tell, and I'll circle back around to the whole processor debate later on. So it comes in a range of colors. I don't like the blue color. I know everyone loves the blue color. I'm not into it. I think Starlight is nice. Um, but yeah. So again, it's the similar footprint in size to the regular iPad. It's just it's got a bigger screen. I think it's like 10.9 inch. Yeah, there you go. Just shy of 11 inch, and it's nice, pretty screen. It does it. How can I put it? It does everything that an iPad Pro does, the 11-inch one, except it doesn't do it as well. Like, okay, it's got a great display, but the display is like, it's not a mini LED display, which is like really nice, rich colors, and it's not got the high refresh rate either. It doesn't have four speakers. It doesn't have like four cameras on the back, but like is good enough for a large majority of people. This is like the go-to iPad if you're not on a budget and want a big iPad. Like, yeah, this is the one that most people end up going to. And again, it's compatible with the second generation Apple Pencil that sticks onto the side. And here's the other thing, it works with the Apple Magic Keyboard. So this converts your iPad into a somewhat half-breed laptop. Um, Realistically, is it good as a laptop? Yes and no, depends on your usage, and I'll dive into that later on as well. Oh, and here's the other thing actually. The iPad mini and the iPad Air both, and well, all the iPads except for the basic one all use USB Type C. So that means the same cable you plug into your Samsung phone, the same cable you use to charge your MacBook, the same cable you use to charge with any modern device, you can charge your iPad with as well now. So the only Lightning compatible devices remaining are the iPhones and the basic iPad. And to be honest, that makes the basic iPad even more budget friendly because there's so many cables available. And if you're an iPhone owner anyway, you probably got the cable knocking around. So it's one less thing to buy and one less thing to carry and look after. And again, this page is talking about iPad OS and it does a ton of cool stuff. It's fine. It's you know probably the best tablet operating system out there until Android decides to figure out what they want to do. Um, and then I think the next iPad we want to look into is the iPad Pro models. So the iPad Pro comes in, I think, 11 and 12 inch. Um, but yeah, so it's got that amazing M1 chip in there, which is generally quite good because if you consider the A14 or A15, it has 4 GB of RAM, and this has 8 GB, which is pretty impressive because iPad itself doesn't use that much memory. But um, the iPad OS doesn't use that much RAM for multitasking, but the fact that this has now 8 gigs means that your multitasking can last longer. Going in the future, when iPad OS decides to turn around and say, we're gonna open up the system a little more and let you do some more funky weird stuff, maybe even do 4 app split screen like you can do on Samsung tablets. Um, it'll allow you to do that without sweating, without breaking a sweat. So yeah, like it's a great chip. I can't deny that. But it's not in Apple's interest to cannibalize their laptop market. This is a really interesting point, to be honest, because you'd have to want a tablet like an iPad. They're not gonna replace a laptop when it comes to doing real deal serious work. It's not gonna replace a laptop, but it is a great in between for something that's potentially coming in the future for a lot of people, which is um mobile. Sorry, it's um shoot, I forgot the term, but it's basically like a mobile worker. Like they they don't require a desk to sit on. They don't require to be in an office. They can just be wherever they want to be, and just pull out their iPad or pull out their phone, and then just do their work. And I think the iPad Pro is the first step in that direction. Um, and look at all these cameras. Like you don't need more than one camera on an iPad when they've gone all out. I think they're giving you a similar sensor to one of the pro level iPhones, so you can do all sorts of cool stuff. And just so another thing to keep in mind is all the iPads with the USB-C ports, so the Mini, the Air, and the Pro, they all do display out via USB-C. Now the issue with this is it only outputs at 4:3, so you're going to get black bars on the left and right. But other than that, in the middle, you'll get the video, unless the app specifically says it wants to use a full screen. So they're using LumaFusion here as a demonstration. LumaFusion is like a video editor on the iPad. Um, so you can see there that it's outputting the viewfinder onto the Magic Display. And then yeah, so if you got the pencil and you got the Magic Keyboard, it does transform the laptop closer to sorry, the iPad closer into a laptop. Would you want to do that? It depends. If you're sitting writing a lot of Google Docs, if you're in spreadsheets, um if you're using your iPad for a video editor, I would probably recommend getting the keyboard just because you can just use shortcut keys. Um, But other than that, would you want to turn it into that, or would you rather just go and buy a MacBook? Because that keyboard isn't cheap. It's like 300 odd pounds. That keyboard is not cheap. And when you pair it with an iPad Air or even Pro, what's that, about close to £900? You'd rather just get the M1 MacBook Air, unless you categorically specifically have a use case for iOS only apps, iPad OS only apps. But versatility isn't a bad word. Like to be able to have a tablet when you need it and a laptop when you need it, similar to like a Microsoft Surface, except this product actually has apps and stuff. But let's continue down. So yeah, the Apple Pencil and doing artwork is great. The keyboard's cool too, but it's kind of weird. It's kind of like it's it's a good implementation of a poor idea. We'll see. We'll see how it goes in the future. So yeah, that's long and short of it. So now here's a question, right? iPads are great if you have a use for them, but the real question comes down to is who? Who are they for? So I've got a list here. Okay, so there's the budget user, the student, the gamer, the creator, the artist, and the programmers. So the budget iPad, sorry, the budget user, who would they go? Who should what iPad should the budget user go for? Which is essentially the basic one. For £320, you get everything you need to just use an iPad. Get into the ecosystem. This is the one that you get for your grandparents, get and maybe get for your kids. The only alternative for your kids would be the iPad mini, but I'd probably go for the basic iPad instead. Or if you had to go Apple. If not, then the Amazon Fire tablets are just fine. Now, for 320 odd pounds, you're gonna get everything. And this is one of those where if you're getting this for your child, like your 10, 11-year-old kid, this is something that they can grow up with pending they look after it. Is as and when they need, you can go and get an Apple Pencil. As and when they require something to do their essays and Word documents on, they can get a keyboard case. Even like a Bluetooth keyboard will work, like even like a £5-10 cheap one. So as their use cases for the iPad grows, so can their accessories. So it's not you don't have to go all in immediately. The other thing is for your grandparents and stuff. It's hard for us to for a lot of people to remember, but buttons are a great thing, and the fact that the iPad has a button on the front and swipe gestures do get confusing. They know that okay, the home button, the lock button, the volume up and down, they can somewhat figure out everything else around that. So it's good. And the other thing is it's got chunky bezels, so they can hold it with confidence. It's not like the newest Samsung phones where they have ultra thin bezels and then you're getting a lot of um, accidental touches because of your palm. So yeah, this is one that you get for your kids, old people, or if you're on a budget, it's fine. It's no one's gonna like criticize you for getting a budget iPad. Like it's the smartest option out of all the iPads because for a third of the money of an iPad Pro, you're getting 90% of what an iPad Pro does. It's excellent value. And I personally think this design is here to stay for at least another 2 or 3 years, so it won't get old that quick. Um, and obviously, once it's in a case and stuff, like you won't be able to tell. Um, then the next one is for students, and again, for students, I would turn around and say, okay, there is a couple of types of students. So you've got your primary slash up to maximum high school. This should be fine. If they need an iPad to do a bit of word processing and spreadsheets, just do their homework and stuff, the iPad is fine. They're not really going to take it to school. They're just going to sit at home and type into a Google Doc or something. Personally, I'd rather get them a desktop computer and put it in the corner, like on or a laptop or something, and have it in the kitchen or somewhere so they can so you can see what they're up to. But if you have to get them an iPad, 300 quid for an iPad is probably better than any £300 computer out there that you're gonna buy brand new. And the best thing about it is iPad OS has like parental controls, so you can keep an eye on what's going on. I highly recommend, especially in this day and age. Um, then the second set of students is college and university level. So depending on what you're studying, if you're studying like English or math, and you don't really require any advanced level computing programs, this basic iPad is fine. Um, if if you have, for example, like I mentioned earlier, you take a lot of notes. You get an Apple Pencil and use the iPad as your note taking device. Now, the iPad basic is fine. It'll do the job. But if you have a little bit of money to spend, a little bit of money, I would strongly consider the iPad Mini. Now, looking at the size of this, it's the size of about an A5 booklet, and you'll get the fancier Apple Pencil that will magnetically stick to the side, and you get everything in something that can just fit into a pocket or a handbag or big pair of jeans, however you want to go. Um, and yeah, like it's a somewhat pro iPad, but without the pro price. Um, would going for a iPad Air be overkill? Maybe, just because of the size. You got to understand that these iPads aren't necessarily small, and it's not the size of like an A4 pad. It's broader, which is my issue. It's closer to A3 than it is A4, and then like you don't want to be that guy who's walking around with a kitchen tray, um, or guy or girl walking around with a kitchen tray as your note taking device. I'll say this: iPads are not laptop replacements until they are. With that, I mean, if your course, your whatever subjects you're studying require you to use a computer, buy a computer. Do not buy an iPad. If your course requires you to do a bit of word processing and research stuff on the internet, copy and paste, iPad's perfectly fine. But 9 times out of 10, if I ever want to do serious work, I will use a computer. Maybe that's nature nurture, but unless your course specifically requires you to use like a mobile app or something, probably buy a computer. But if you have to buy an iPad, like the iPad Mini is a great companion device. Like, oh, you got your MacBook Air, get an iPad Mini. Best of both worlds. I wouldn't recommend getting an iPad Air if you have a MacBook Pro, because the screen size is more or less the same. And then it comes a case like if you got to do work, which are you going to take out, the 13-inch device or the 11-inch device, like the big one or the not so big one? Whereas with the Mini, you can turn around and say, well, it's an in between. It's between my phone and my iPad. Sorry, between my phone and my MacBook. So I'm biased. I'm biased for the Mini, but yeah, it's the one I like. And in terms of gamers as well, like this would be my go-to device for mobile gaming. Now, there are ways to get like retro emulators on this. If I do get an iPad, I will definitely look at GameCube emulation. There's a video out there, I think, by ETA Prime, and he's got a YouTube channel where he does video game emulation on all sorts of devices, and he's got a couple of videos on doing it on iPads and Android devices as well. The video he's done on the iPad Mini is pretty cool. It does run it does run GameCube games quite well, which is something that my 8-inch Android tablet is severely lacking. It's not the fault of the software; it's the fault of the tablet. The tablet runs an Intel processor, and they didn't make Dolphin for Intel, but they made it for um, all the other types of processors. But nonetheless, there's a few ways to get different emulators on here, and that'd be quite interesting. I wouldn't be surprised in the next 2 or 3 years we get PlayStation 3 emulators and that generation. So, yeah. Now, my only gripe with the M1, so the iPad Mini, is it doesn't have the M1 chip, and if it did, it'd be a powerhouse of a device. It'd be a sleeper, but personally, I don't think it will. I don't think it will get an M1 chip because the chip it's currently using is the one in the iPad Pro. Sorry, in the iPhone Pro. I think iPhone 13, 14 that we're on now. In the Pro Max model. So, and even then, it's underclocked slightly. I think that when they make these computer chips, they use the best ones in the product it's intended for, and then if it's somewhat good enough, they will downclock it a little bit more and then put it in another product. So I think what they've done with this is the bad batch of M1 chips for that aren't good enough for The iPhones, they put in this iPad Mini because they know that the use case for them is is very niche. And yeah, like if you're gonna spend what about this is about 500 odd pounds. If you're gonna spend that much on an iPad, you'd probably think, oh well, I'll spend a bit more and get a bigger screen. You have to really want the small screen. And the reason why I think it's great for gamers is because it's a small, light device. It's bigger than your phone, but it's not overly big like a iPad Air. It's big enough to chuck in your pocket or leave laying around. You can hold this for hours and you won't get fatigue compared to a larger iPad, which is where you might find a bit of RSI and a bit of strain. Now, the other thing I'll say is if you're a gamer, you're looking for an iPad, is you can consider a larger iPad like the basic iPad or the iPad Air if you are gaming with a separate controller. If you got like a PlayStation or an Xbox controller that you're pairing with the iPad and you got the iPad stood up, then you're saying, okay, it's all right, it's not bad. You can make do with it. But if that was the case, like there's a scenario where you can plug your this iPad Mini into a external monitor or something, or a TV or something, and play that way. So it comes down to your use case. Like I mentioned, I'm biased towards the iPad Mini, but the iPad Air is a great device. Now, the next one is creators. So, um, originally I was going to recommend the iPad Air for content creators, but the Mini, everything I'm going to say about the iPad Air is applicable to the iPad Mini, which is if you're like a social media manager and or you're working in marketing or you're working in something that requires you to be it requires you to be at a screen at all times, but you don't have to be at a computer. Like you don't require something that that's needs a certain Windows or Mac app, then an iPad would be great. An iPad Air is perfectly fine because here's the thing, right? A majority of things that digital marketers do can be done on a web browser. And the iPad, I think in iOS 13 or 14, they added support for a proper mouse support. So if you've got a Bluetooth mouse, a Magic Mouse, you can now properly use it on an iPad. Now, if you're like a social media marketer, like you can forget about Instagram ever being good on an iPad. Um, the best way to do it is go to Instagram on Safari and download it as a bookmark. That's your best bet. Other than that, like using Canva, using Twitter, Facebook, you can probably use all those in split screen multitasking view. And Canva is a part of my workflow as well as Facebook Business Manager and stuff. So being able to do that with the Apple Pencil um, on your iPad wherever you are, and I have a dream, like many people do, which is to sit on a beach and do your work and relax, you know, while, taking in some sun and getting some work done, not sitting in a grey office behind a chair, looking at, motivational posters, XYZ. And I think the iPad is a big step in the right direction for that, especially with the right accessories. Like the good thing with the iPad Air is you've got your iPad and you've got the Magic Keyboard and the Apple Pencil. With that combination, you can have any device you want. You can have a media consumption device, you can have a content creation device, word processing, whatever you want, it becomes it. And the other question is, would you go for an iPad Pro or would you stick with the Air if you're going at 11 inches? And it ultimately it depends. Do you need four speakers? Yes or no? Do you need a high refresh rate display? Do you need I think for the iPad Pro, the minimum storage is 128 gigs, and for the Air, it's 64 gigs. So if you need more storage and you go for the 256 iPad Air, it's only a little bit more for a load of hardware improvements, like I mentioned, the screen, the speakers, the camera, and all of a sudden you've got a much better device with half the amount of storage, but with a little bit more money. That might be a bit more of a convincing choice until I think later in this year when they announce an updated iPad Pro, um, or even early next year, where they turn around and say, okay, well, we're no longer doing the 11-inch iPad Pro, we're now only doing the 12 or the 13-inch iPad Pro. Then it becomes a bit different, but you have to ask yourself, do you need pro features or are you okay with doing the bare minimum basic? Even with the iPad mini, okay, if you go for 256 storage, then you think, oh, well, if I go pay a little bit more, I can get an iPad Air. Valid point. But you have to want that small size of the mini. Um, so yeah, it swings and roundabouts. It depends on how you want to play things, how you want it. So next up is for artists, right? Oh, actually, just to go back for a second, for creators, if you're a video editor, now that the iPad Air has the M1 chip, it makes it a no-brainer. I know the iPad Mini can pretty much handle its own, but because it's got 8 gigs of RAM, it might be a bit better at and the M1 chip, it might be a bit better at doing video editing. Now, moving on for artists again. With artist use case, more bigger is better. The bigger your canvas size, the more fun you can have with it. And you know, it's going for the iPad Pro is probably better than going for a Wacom, unless you want to use like Photoshop. If your workflow requires Photoshop or Illustrator, then getting a MacBook or something and a Wacom is the better option. But if you're happy using Procreate or something like that, then yeah, the iPad Pro will be just fine. Now, the reason why I recommend the Pro over um the Air is because one is screen size, two is a high refresh rate screen, and three is I think it's a brighter screen, and four is it's a better quality screen. So with a mini LED and all that advanced technology that they've got in there, I think it's an overall better screen to do the work on. But if you're just a hobbyist artist and you're just making t-shirts for Redbubble and that kind of stuff, the Air should be fine. The Air should be fine. Like I said, you have to. It's very similar to the Mini. You have to genuinely want or have a use case for the Pro features, and with the Mini, you have to genuinely want and need a use case for the Mini size. Um, Otherwise, the iPad Air pretty much does do it all. Um, in a premium shape and body compared to the basic iPad. And yeah, here you go. The Apple Pencil and Adobe Fresco. So yeah. And then also the pro level iPads come with the you can get the Magic Keyboard, which looks like an excellent accessory, but like if you are not an artist, then maybe you don't need the pro level iPad. Unless you're like working in like a big tech and you need to use AR and VR and all sorts of high end uh, systems. Like I don't think there's a use case for an iPad Pro. But here's the thing, right? The Pro option is there for people who want it, but it's not for everyone. It's like a BMW 7 Series. It's a huge car. It's essentially a limousine. You can see them around. You can go to a store and buy them, a dealership and buy them, but you'd have to want to buy them. Like, what makes a 7 Series better than a 5 Series? A 5 Series is just like a large saloon. So, yeah, I'm sorry if I alienated a lot of you with the car analogy. It was the one that comes to mind first. All this is recorded in like one take, so please do cut me some slack. Um, but yeah, the final option is for programmers. Like, number one, why are you programming on a iPad? It can be done, but would you really want to? Uh, just go get it, because look, getting an iPad Pro plus the keyboard, you might as well just get a MacBook Air. Like, it's £1,000. Like, it's gonna be way better. It's the same chip. It's gonna be way better than an iPad Pro. But if you had to get an iPad and you're a programmer, then yeah, the iPad Pro is fine. Like, it'll last you way longer than anything else, any other iPad. Um, but why? Uh, so yeah. Okay, so um, from the top of my head, I did say there are a couple of things I'm going to circle back around to. Let's have a look. So one of them, there we go. We'll go full screen. So one of them was the longevity of the iPad. Realistically, I think the iPad will just last 7 years regardless of which one you buy. That's how long the software support lasts for, and that's how long you can reasonably use it. Now, for the basic average people, yeah, sure, you can get the regular iPad, any iPad, and it'll just work. For the power users, like if you upgrade your phone every year, every 2 years, then getting the basic iPad is not enough for you. You'd want the iPad Mini or the Air or the Pro. Now, circling back to one of the other points I made, which was, who is the iPad Air for, right? Who's it for? Because let's pull it up. Because the thing is, if you wanted a 10-inch iPad, get the iPad regular. I think it's like 10.1 inch. Why would you? The only reason why you'd go for the iPad Air is because you wanted a premium design. You wanted the M1 chip in an iPad at a lower cost. You did not want to upgrade the storage from 64 gigs. So that's one hand. But on the flip side is, how can I put it? The iPad, from my perspective, the iPad Air is an iPad for Android users, right? Because Android users, we're used to using like Samsung tablets, which have a really thin bezel, and they're futuristic. They're light. They have a great display, and they tend to be quite a bit larger in size than an iPad. Think of the Sony Z4 tablet, any of the Samsung Plus and Ultra tablets, even the Lenovo ones. I think they're big, and this is like a seamless transition from Android to iOS, because the iPad Air uses USB Type C, and the only difference now is just software. Um, so yeah, that's my sort of hot take, my perspective. And the other thing is that the M1 chip, it's a really important. It's like, how can I put it? It's important, and it's a major step forward in mobile processing. But also, this is Apple. Like, their whole business model is to make you want to buy something. They won't turn around and talk about spec in an advert. I don't think they've ever turned around and said, "Oh, our latest camera is, I don't know, like 12 megapixel or 20 megapixel." They just say, "Look at the amazing cinematic video our camera produces." Like, their whole focus is based on experience, and this M1 chip does bring a certain experience, but there will be an M2 chip and an M3, or even an M1S. like the chip will grow, and then they turn around and say, okay, well, how can we sell a bunch of other iPads to a new generation? So a new generation of users. So there will come a time when your M1 chip will be slow and sluggish, but I would guess that would be at a time when the iPad operating system has evolved closer to Mac OS. You see, nothing on iPad taxes the M1 chip unless you're using Procreate or LumaFusion or something, like you're doing video editing or you're making animations or drawing. Nothing really taxes the M1 chip. Nothing even taxes the like A13 Bionic in the basic iPad. So what's the purpose of the Air? From my perspective, it's an Android device that just runs iOS. It's got one camera like the average Android tablet, and it's just got an amazing processor in there that's very tempting. Like if the iPad Mini had an M1 chip, it'd be excellent. Um, it'd be a no-brainer. But time will tell if that will get an M1 chip, because here's the thing, right? This is one of the other points I wanted to make, which is the iPhone. I don't think the iPhone will ever get an M1 chip until maybe 4 to 5 years down the line, because the M1 chip is one chip that Apple can create and develop and use across all devices, whether it's their um, Mac Studio, Mac Mini, um, MacBook, what's it called, iMacs and MacBook Pros, MacBook Airs, and now the iPads. I don't think we'll see it trickle down to anything smaller than the um, iPad Air. I think the iPad Basic and the iPad Mini will still continue using the H series chip from the iPhone. This is because the A series chips are probably more power efficient than the M1, and because of the somewhat budget pricing of the basic iPad and iPad Mini, they want to keep the prices down. So by chucking in a mobile phone chip into there, like a very capable mobile phone chip, but a mobile phone chip nonetheless into those smaller devices, um, they're categorically telling you that yes, you can do some good stuff on this device, but if you wanted to do great stuff, you want to go for an M1 capable device. So yeah, um, and then after that, like ultimately, you can to summarize. Okay, let's summarize now. Okay, so if you want to go buy an iPad, the one to buy is probably the basic one, the plain Jane basic iPad. Uh, I, there you go. The plain iPad. It does everything you'd want at a very very good price. Like you can't realistically buy a laptop for £319. There it is, £319. You can't buy a laptop for that much. That's going to be as capable as this iPad is, and run as smooth and as well and as long as this iPad will. But if you've got a bit of money to spend and you don't mind having a I don't know, if you've got a bit of money to spend, then I'd say you go to the iPad Air. That's probably the best iPad you can buy without breaking the bank. Um, then it's the one I'd recommend to most people who uh, aren't necessarily budget conscious, or they want to splash the cash a bit, or they care about aesthetics. I think that's another important thing to keep in mind. If you if you lead a certain lifestyle that you want to be shown only having the ultra and the best, then yeah, fine, go for the iPad Air. It looks just like the iPad Pro as well, which is a bonus, except for the camera module. Um, but yeah, so for majority of people, get the iPad Basic. If you got some money to spare, go get the iPad Air. Um, then, in regards to the iPad Mini, you need to want the small size. You have to you have to be able to justify getting a smaller iPad. Otherwise, for a little bit more, just get the iPad Air, or save a bit of money and put it onto getting an Apple Pencil or a keyboard case and get the basic iPad. When it comes to the iPad Pro models, now that comes down to your workflow. Can you justify that cost? Does that cost have to go into an iPad Pro? Because there's a scenario here where you can go and get the basic iPad Air and get a basic iPad and have best of both. There is a valid scenario there where that can happen, and only you can, unfortunately, only you can answer these questions. But an iPad as a companion device is quite good because look, there's quite a few people out there who do not like large phones. That's why the iPhone Mini exists. So you could go out and basically have an iPhone Mini plus an iPad, even iPad Mini or iPad Air, whatever, and use your phone as a phone. And if you ever need to do anything more than that, you've got an iPad at hand. Um, like I said, if you're out and about, you're a road warrior, then the iPad Mini is pretty cool for that. But for most people, the iPad Basic is fine. iPad Air, if you got a bit of money to spend. But before I would make that leap to the iPad Air, I'd probably buy the keyboard case and the Magic Pencil for the basic iPad. Um, and that's the other thing is about when you buy the iPad. I think in August or September there's an Apple event and they'll probably announce a newer iPad Basic. Um, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that will have an M1 chip. I don't think it will. Personally, I don't. It doesn't make logical sense. But maybe it'll have an M1 chip in there, and or maybe it'll have USB Type C. Um, but realistically, I think it's just going to be whatever. I think maybe even an A15 processor in there, and that's it. But if, for example, the Mini, there's a 50-50 shot right now whether it will get an M1 chip or not. Personally, I don't think it will, but if it does, that will be one mean device. Um, so yeah, to summarize the summary, because I know I like to ramble. Um, you want an iPad? Get the basic one. You got money to spend? Get the Air. If you have a specific use case to get to want a small device, get the Mini. If you have a specific use case to get the Pro, really question, do you even need the Pro? Like if you're a digital artist and stuff, like do you really need it? Or you'd be better off with a laptop and a Wacom. Because keep in mind, right? Apple purposely haven't updated the software to the best of the best of the best on this iPad, on iPad OS because they want to sell MacBooks. So like yeah, like until that day comes when they're no longer selling MacBooks, which is crazy because Apple started off selling only MacBooks. Until, how about this, right? Until the day when iPad OS has surpassed Mac OS, that's when we'll see a touchscreen MacBook, not a iPad that can replace a Mac. That would be a more likely scenario. But yeah, regardless, I'm gonna go all the way back and summarize my summary again because I love these tangents. Okay, you want an iPad? Get the basic one. You got money to spend? Get an iPad Air. You want the small size? Get an iPad Mini. If you want an iPad Pro, you have to really want an iPad Pro. Um, so yeah, that's it. And I thought this was going to be like a 10-15 minute video. This is like shy of an hour. Um, so yeah, um, let me know what you think, and let me know in the comments, or share this long ramble with a pal if you want. And I will see you soon, I think. Um, and yeah, all the good stuff like follow, subscribe, share, and let me know what you think of this format as well. I decided to do portrait instead of a landscape because I want to share this on like TikTok and stuff, but I don't think TikTok and Instagram Reels allows videos this long, so I have to maybe cut it up. But yeah, cool. Bye.